In the process of resetting relations with Russia, it seems that Obama administration still has not formulated a US strategy toward Eastern Europe and toward Ukraine. What do you think should be the new administration priorities in that part of the world?
I think the Obama administration has a good slogan, reset, but it's also very vague and a little childish. You don't reset a serious relationship. You try strategically to shape it. And I think the United States essentially has two seemingly contradictory goals to pursue, which in fact ultimately are not contradictory. One of them is to have a more cooperative relationship with Russia. Russia is an important country. We do have some common interests which we ought to pursue. For example, stability in South Central Asia, the issue of the Iranian nuclear program, disarmament, nuclear stability in general. These are legitimate and important objectives. But we also have another objective, namely the consolidation of political pluralism in the space of the former Soviet Union and of the former Soviet bloc. That means making certain, for example, and very specifically again, that Georgia is not undermined, that Ukraine is not turned into a satellite. Now, superficially, these two objectives may seem in conflict, but in fact they are not. Because if Georgia survives, if Ukraine prospers, the chances are in fact greater in the long run that Russia will become a post-imperial democratic state. If Georgia or Ukraine falter, Russia becomes again an empire with growing ambitions, which makes a long-term cooperative relationship with it more difficult. So the contradiction is in fact superficial. In reality, we have to pursue intelligently both aspects of our relationship in a larger sense with Russia, and that cannot be defined by a simple slogan such as reset the relationship.
Do you agree with Senator Lugar that United States has to have more proactive, more engaged policy in Ukraine?
I agree with that. I agree with that. And I have been saying things of this sort for a long time myself. But quite honestly, since this is addressed to the Ukrainian audience, I have to say in all frankness that the ultimate responsibility for preserving Ukrainian independence rests on the shoulders of the Ukrainian people and of the Ukrainian elite. And I find it depressing to look at the top-level divisions in the democratic independence camp, at the internal feuding, at the intrigues, at the opportunities for a foreign power to manipulate internal affairs in Ukraine. And being of Polish origin, I'm also aware of the fact that what Ukraine is experiencing today is depressingly similar to what Poland experienced in the 18th century. At that time, Poland was essentially dominated by an elite that was aristocratic, that was wealthy, that was entrenched in various interests, and was manipulated by foreign powers such as Prussia, Austria, and Russia. And the result was the loss of independence. Today we have an oligarchic elite in Ukraine that is in the pay of foreign interests, that is manipulating the wealth of the country for its own benefit, and is not genuinely committed to the shaping of a nationally based Ukrainian democracy, which can then be an attractive object of European expansion. You cannot expect the Europeans west of Ukraine or people here in America to be more pro-Ukrainian than the Ukrainians. And I say this with emphasis because Ukraine is now approaching presidential elections, and these elections are going to be manipulated from the outside for the purpose of reducing Ukrainian independence, perhaps even of turning Ukraine again into a satellite or even part of a larger imperial system, including perhaps even some loss of territory.
Which country are you referring to?
I think most Ukrainians know what I'm talking about. And if they don't know, then they are so politically uneducated after 20 years of independence that it would be almost despairing.
Okay. In a few months, Ukraine would have a new president. What should be her or his priority in domestic policy and foreign policy?
Well, I would say it's the same thing in domestic and foreign. That is to say, to really consolidate a genuinely respectable democracy in Ukraine, which makes Ukraine an attractive object of interest for the rest of Europe. Culturally, Ukraine is part of Europe. It is important to translate that into political, socio-economic realities. Nobody in Europe was begging Poland to be part of the European Union. The Poles became part of the European Union because they became attractive to the European Union. They showed that they're determined to be a European state in every respect. That made it possible for Poland to be what it is today. Ukraine could be like Poland in 5 to 10 years, with the right leadership and with the right national orientation.
On the foreign policy agenda, how do you see Ukraine-NATO cooperation? Some would say that Ukraine can achieve the better relations with Russia if it would become a member of NATO or any other European security cooperation.
I think it depends, again, on the attitude of the Ukrainian people. If Ukraine becomes part of NATO in a country split within, with limited support for membership in NATO, it's not going to help Ukraine, because it will become itself a source of division which other powers can exploit. The point of departure for membership in NATO is a Ukrainian national identity that has a defined geopolitical outlook, and on the basis of a significant national unanimity, then desires to be part of NATO. Look again at the experience of Poland. Poland did not become a member of NATO with only 30% of the people favoring membership in NATO. It was the overwhelming desire of the people to be in NATO that convinced NATO that the addition of Poland would be a source of greater stability in Central Europe and would in fact enhance the NATO alliance and make the European situation more stable. If Poland was not a member of NATO but divided within, Poland today could be in the same position as Georgia. And that is not an option that the Ukrainians should entertain. It's about time that the political elite of Ukraine and the new generation of Ukrainians, in a calm and rational fashion, consider how best to structure their relationship with Europe and with Russia in such a way that Ukraine is a viable, secure, independent state. And that doesn't mean antagonism towards Russia. It doesn't mean moving to NATO in order to be anti-Russian. It means creating a wider system of European stability and cooperation in which Ukraine, a country of 45 million people, potentially a wealthy country, could play a very important role, thereby also encouraging Russia to move more to the West. I think Ukraine, in a way, can help to shape the future of Russia and give Russia greater security and a role to play in the world. Because otherwise, a Russia between 1.5 billion Chinese, 550 million Europeans, much wealthier than the Russians, will be an empty space with a declining population. So in many respects, if Ukraine evolves constructively, it can help assure Russia a much more promising future.
Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski, for this interview. Okay, thank you.